her.
So, yay.
Hi.
Okay,
Is it
so what
recording?
are we talking about today?
Awesome. Okay. So, just based off of the last time that we talked and we were able to sort of like flesh some things out, I think sometimes it just really helps to be able to verbalize some things.
Mm-hmm.
And I made a post recently about imposter syndrome, because I think also the more that I'm like leaning into this community, the more it comes up of like, are you even qualified to be
Oh my goodness.
talking about
Yes.
these stuff? Right?
Yeah,
And
but
so,
see, you're a legit therapist. So it's really interesting that you have imposter syndrome, because in my mind, I'm like, no, she's totally qualified. And I'm like, I'm just a little measly coach. What do I know? You know?
so I think it's funny how our minds can do that to us. But I think too, like, I think maybe in the past it'd be like, oh, like I'm going to pull back. So instead I'm choosing to lean in and just say, okay, like I don't have to know everything. Right. And I think that being willing to learn is also how, like, I don't know. I just think that that's growth, you know?
Totally.
So I
Agreed.
think so. So yeah, so I just come across some stuff that I'm like, woo, I don't know. want to process with some people. I think also too, I don't actually know if I know much about your story or anything, but like I know personally I came from diet culture and lived it. I mean, my entire life. I mean, I was on a diet since I was 10. So, now being 28 and saying for the first time in my life, I'm not on a diet and will not prescribe to that. I still have disordered thoughts where I'm like, ooh, that's a disordered thought. So yeah, so definitely just wanting to process through with another person who thinks like mine.
Well, I'm so glad. I'm like really honored and touched that you would even think to reach out to me. So
Absolutely.
I'm more than happy to talk about it. So let's do it.
And I told you before, but I'll just tell, in case we should show this, I am going to be eating a snack, which is yogurt and Snickers at some point during this conversation.
Perfect.
So.
I love when people are willing to eat on camera, because most people are not. It's super uncomfortable, and it's one of my favorite things to challenge people to do, actually.
Well, I think from the last time that I did a video with you that you asked me to do that, and I was like, oh, that's weird. But one of the things that I prescribed to as soon as I started making my page is that I'm not going to show you a false facade. So, I think it would be a lie to say like, okay, I'm just going to wait to eat really quickly afterwards. Like I would rather just sit here and eat like we were having a conversation.
Well, I mean, because essentially you're like, I'm hungry. Why would I deny my body nourishment just because someone's going to see me eat? Like, but we do that to ourselves all the time. All the time.
100%. Now, if it's going to trigger somebody, I definitely, wouldn't. And so, but I think, for the most part, so like even like yesterday, I had a full face of makeup on, and I thought that I was like, oh, if we had recorded yesterday, I would have had a full face of makeup on. Today, I don't, and I'm not going to go run upstairs and put it on because it's just not authentic for me. So, I mean, what you see is what you get, and so like anytime I make a video, I'm not going to go change to present myself on camera. I want it to be as genuine and as raw as possible. So,
I love that.
Yeah. Jumping right in. So the last time we had talked, we were talking about exclusivity in the health at every size community and how do we make a bridge to those who are still in diet culture and who are still prescribed to diet culture thoughts. And so I was trying
to remember. I was like, okay, last time we talked with like the book
last time we talked
interview
on the phone.
Or like the time before that.
Before that.
Got it. Okay. Yes.
So recently I had been approached by a friend who is currently doing a diet, and she had basically told me she didn't want to tell me because she was afraid of what I was gonna say. And I think I actually admonished the diet she was doing on my feed or something. And so I'm very cautious now too of, I'm in this juxtaposition, right, of wanting to share the knowledge that I have and encouraging those who feel distraught and feel like there's no other options, but also not wanting to shame or alienate somebody who has
Mm-hmm.
chosen or is choosing differently. And I just listened to the podcast by Christy Harrison. I think her name is Virginia Soul. She's I think that was her name. She is a journalist. And she says, like, right at the end, she's like, I think sometimes in the Hayes community and in, with this movement, sometimes we do judge or ostracize people who are not in it. And
Mm-hmm.
she's like, and I think that that's counterintuitive. And I was like, yes, I totally agree.
Yes.
So
Well,
yeah, just
not just counterintuitive, more like counterproductive in some way.
yeah,
Because it's like if we are teaching inclusivity with our food and bodies, but then in the same breath we are excluding certain diets or certain dieters because, like it is, and it is really tricky. I've wondered myself, like, how do you stand for something that you believe in and that you really want to help
yeah,
support others in discovering and
yes,
their own truth, essentially, without excluding the other side. And it's interesting because I literally just had this conversation about like creating this binary system or this dichotomy
mm-hmm.
where we think it has to be one or the other.
Right,
And
right,
and it's like something that I had learned in therapy was the difference between and versus or but, right? Whenever
mm-hmm.
you use the word and, it's inclusive, right? It's this idea of I love my children and they drive me crazy. Like, it's both, right? It's both. But we don't use inclusive language very often. Our minds don't work in
Right,
that way. We really do think black and white. We create
right.
these differences, right?
Mm.
So what happens when you say things like, well, I love my children, but they drive me crazy? One truth is negating the other.
Right.
And that sends you to crazy town because you're like, I'm a horrible mother, or like,
Right.
you know what I'm saying? Like, it creates this
Yeah.
conflict that doesn't necessarily have to be there.
Mm.
So I kind of am sensing that same sort of dissonance when I
Mm.
start to shift paradigms from diet culture into more weight inclusive or just weight
Right.
neutral, health at every size.
Right.
But I think in our efforts as a society and just as healthcare providers, shifting from one end of the spectrum to the next, I think that's just a natural tendency of ours, is to swing pendulum wise. Like, well,
Yeah.
this is bad and this is good. Well, now this is good and this is bad. Instead of just saying,
Right.
there's everything on the spectrum and someone is going to fall somewhere on the spectrum. So what do you do
Sure.
for those people?
Right.
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 And
So
it's
it makes
hard.
it very messy, right? And so what I had tried to encourage my friend is that I always have to come back to my why, right? Of like, what is my purpose in doing this work? And my why has always been to help end eating disorders and eradicate eating disorders and help people love their body and create peace and freedom with food. And so my why is, yeah, so the diet that she's currently prescribed to, which she won't identify as a diet, which is
The lifestyle.
mhm.
Yeah.
And I would never prescribe to somebody with an active eating disorder
Mm-hmm.
because I would be fearful, and I'm not a dietitian, so I wouldn't be able to prescribe it to begin with. But trying to encourage her in that way as well too, of like, it's and I said something along the lines of like, it's not personal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, her choice to be on a diet or to have this lifestyle, that's her choice. And so that's why I had used your my body my choice.
Yeah.
And then I did say it right when I was talking to her: my body my choice, my plate my business.
Mm-hmm.
But still stuck in this, like, I don't want people to feel like they can't come to me or talk to me, because she's not the first person who was like, oh yeah, I feel like what I'm doing isn't matching what you're talking about,
Yes.
so I'm not welcome. And I'm
Yes.
like, no, everybody's welcome.
And I've had that too. And so it's again finding that balance of how do you meet someone where they're at. The problem here for me personally, and I'm just gonna throw in a disclaimer, like I could totally be wrong, like because this is
Hmm.
me and my experience, right?
Yeah.
But in my opinion, I do believe that is like your body, your choice, right? That comes to food choices and diet as just using the term of food choices and eating habits, not
What you eat.
necessarily
Yep.
eat, right? It's just your diet
Yeah.
in general.
Hmm.
That is your choice.
Yeah.
Whenever someone chooses a restrictive diet, I have to ask, like, why? Like, what is your intention behind it?
Right.
Not that the choice is bad, but really getting clear, like, why do you want to?
Right.
Um, because I think our tendency as humans is to, we think that that's what we want, but really we've been conditioned to think that that's what we want.
Right.
And the thing with diet culture, it is very much this extrinsic versus intrinsic decision, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
you might think, well, no, I really do want to eat this way. But if you're so caught up in diet culture, you might actually not want to. You just think you do. And that's why it gets so messy. And so
Right.
for me, what I struggle with is I can no longer promote or perpetuate diet culture because it is so prevalent, because it
Yeah.
does affect the way we think and feel about our food.
Right.
Um, and so it's almost like we don't need another person out there subscribing to this diet or that diet because that already happens. I'd rather fight or give voice for the underdog, which is you can be healthy at every size, or you can experience health at every size, or you can have an an internal relationship with your food. But I don't want to become just another external authority figure like any other diet culture saying, well, intuitive eating is the only way to eat. Because that might not be the case for that person.
And it's
You know,
almost like another rule, like another.
exactly.
Right. And I
So,
think I think the concept of intuitive eating scares people,
yeah.
right? I think I've been approached by a couple of people who I have somebody who's in the fitness world who is like, aren't you concerned that people are on your page and they're just gonna think that they can eat whatever they want and it justifies, them eating whatever they want and it's possible, right? That's I can't say for sure that, but I don't know. I don't know if I've ever used somebody else's page to justify what I'm doing. I think that if somebody has an active eating disorder and then they just are like, well, body image with Bree says I can eat whatever I want.
Right.
That, I mean, they're not. It's not a sound, thought process.
Mhm.
Um, but I don't know where I was going with that. But yeah, no, I definitely agree. That's very necessary.
So it really is, I think, not only is it a personal decision, but having these conversations really need to be done individually as well. Because
Mm,
for that person who is participating in a certain way of eating, you can't just say, well, you're wrong. You- because that
no,
they would
right,
then that would be shameful. Um,
right,
but at the same time, in the same breath, I can't say what you're doing is right either. I all I can say is, well, that's your choice. How do you feel? And then I can celebrate those things. Like, well, I'm really glad that you're feeling in tune with your body. I'm really glad that's seeming to work for you. But I can't say just because it works for you, it now works for everyone else
mm,
either. And
right,
I think that's the biggest crux is, what are you hoping to experience out of this diet? And if
right,
you don't get that, how will you feel? Because if you're a failure because you don't reach this success, that's not helpful. But if you're
right,
doing it because it feels good, or because you're wanting to build muscle, like you have some specific why, then that's your choice, and whatever strategy you want to get to that point. But just being aware that if you are attached to a specific outcome and if you don't get it, it defines your worth, that's a problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know,
It's so good. I think one of the things that you said that like really stuck with me right through that is like, what is your goal? And I think that oftentimes it like, so even from, my story, I stopped saying it was about the weight when I was like 18 years old.
mhm,
It's not about the weight. It's not about the
being
weight. It's
healthy.
about right, exactly.
Mhm,
It's about my health. It's about, and I had all of these reasons, and it wasn't until I was in therapy when I was 23, and my therapist, she pointed out the cognitive difference. She was like, no, no, no. She was like, if it's not about the weight, then why aren't you healthy now? And I was
mhm,
like, oh my God, I didn't realize it till now. And so, and I'm known for saying that we can't talk about body image unless we talk about our relationship with movement
mhm,
and
mhm.
food. And I think that anybody who has ever been in a bigger body has a strenuous relationship or tumultuous relationship with food,
Right.
because I've always wanted to be a foodie. Like there are certain foods that I just love, and I love food experiences, but it also felt like, of course, like the fat girl loves food,
Right.
um, but
Right.
never had an active eating disorder. I've never been a binge eater. It's just never been in my history. Have been a chronic dieter though. And so one of the things that this individual had said to me is the reason that they're on this diet is because intuitive eating scares them
Mhm,
and they feel out of control with food.
mhm.
And so whatever they were doing at the time, or that they're doing, gave them a semblance of control or
Right.
perceived control over the food. And so and there's it's a very popular diet. I don't want to name it because I don't want to
Sure. Yeah.
give credit to it, but lots of people have had similar success with it, in feeling this perceived food freedom. um, and it was one I actually have done myself. And so I guess as a coach, like, what is your advice to people who are afraid of intuitive eating? Like, what's your
Oh,
advice?
geez. That is such a good question. There are a couple of things I would want to unpack is for like getting clear on the why, right? So if it really is, I want to feel in control. First of all, I would say, okay, control is just a strategy. Like, really, what's going on for you? Like, why is control so important? And why is being out of control so terrifying? Like, what?
Mm,
Let's untangle that a little bit. Like, why? Right? It's like the why behind the why,
that's
right?
good.
And so for me, I most of my work is in it's values based, right? So for me, it would be, what would you hope to experience by having control with your food? Do you just need some structure, some stability, some order? Those are values,
Yeah. Ooh,
right?
that's good.
Um,
I'm taking notes.
yes, please do. So that's one I will, that's usually where I go, is like the value. What are you wanting to experience in that strategy? And then once you can say, okay, well, what are some other ways you can experience those values?
That's so good.
You know,
It's so
and for some people, like I happen to be a very organized person. Like I like order and structure as well. Like that is important for me. Not necessarily because I need to be in control, although that has shown up for me, and that's why I have struggled with food. So, like, I get that. But I also have realized that that's just a core value of mine. It's
mm,
important. Order is important for me, and that's okay too. Um, so for me, it's like meal plans work for me because I like having that order. But for me, it's not like I have to eat this and this and this, and if I don't, I'm a failure. It's more of like, well, I have theme nights. This is how I plan my meals. So I have like Mexican Monday, which gives me the freedom to say, well, what sounds good, that's also within this framework, because that
nice.
provides some structure. But I have done the emotional work that if I start to feel like anxious that I'm not following through with that plan, I get to say, oh, hold on. What's going on here for me? Like, what is the emotion underneath this? What's the limiting focus that's stopping me in my tracks? Like, where is this anxiety coming from? instead of automatically going to, well, I need to get really strict with my food, right?
Mm-hmm.
And this is something you can apply to even weight loss. And this, I hope this is going to make sense, but underneath weight loss for some people, the value is beauty. And our society has said this is beautiful. That's the problem, right? The value of beauty is not a problem. It's just
Yeah.
our perception or strategy to experience that value, right?
Mm.
So you can say, well, what, instead of focusing on what is not beautiful, let's find some strategies that are beautiful. So the idea of like widening your definition of what beauty means. So following social media influencers that are in different sizes,
Mm-hmm.
then you can kind of break down that mental construct of thin equals beauty. Then you can be like, oh wow, there is a lot of beauty elsewhere. Or going, it's like the difference between going to a gallery show in an art museum, right? And some people think that modernism is beautiful, and some people think, classic. I don't know. I'm not an art buff, but do you get what I'm saying? Like
100%.
So for me, so if it's whether someone is in a larger body or a smaller body, and they're so consumed with this strategy of weight loss because that they've equated with beauty, if you can unpack that and say, okay, clearly beauty is important to you. This is a false sense of beauty. This isn't necessarily true. So how else can you experience beauty? Maybe it's having fun with makeup. I'm not a huge makeup person, but I'm not going to tell other people they can't wear makeup because they have fun.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it's wearing, a pretty dress. Maybe it's like just even feeling pretty, but that doesn't have to look or, you know what I'm saying? Like this is getting really,
100%.
really
No,
confusing.
it's really good. And it's kind of funny, not planned at all. But I'm working with an individual at the moment who, she identifies as a vegan,
Mhm.
but then is not practicing veganism in many ways. And so I was
Mm.
I was struggling through again, the dissonance of like, okay, well, you're saying one thing, but then you're doing another. So I happen to have like right on hand this values worksheet that I took
Yay!
from, I took off
Yeah.
of, I think it's like psychologyaid.com. And yeah, I think that, so some of the values that they have here, family, marriage, parenting. And what it asks you to do is just like from 1 to 10, identify how important it is for you.
Mhm.
And I think what's hard though is we have to identify in like clarity. So kind of based off what you're saying, small tangent.
Mhm.
I know that for myself, I never identified that it was about beauty, right? It was always, this is about health. This is
Mhm.
about health. And
Mhm.
until someone said to me, how do you define health? Which at the time I defined as being balanced with eating, because I just was like, I don't want to feel out of control with food, which again, small tangent, never had an eating disorder, but restricted so that there were times that I would feel out of control with
Right.
food. So on those diets, and then I'd be around these foods and I'd be like, man, why can't I stop? Now I know.
Right.
Um, and adding movement to my day. And she was like, well, then you are healthy. And I was like, no, I'm not. Because it was about the number. And
Yeah.
I'm currently reading The Beauty Myth by Naomi Wolf, which a lot to get through, but
Mhm.
has some really good stuff of just about how of the beauty myth of where the ideal of beauty came from, right? And
Mhm.
where the messages of beauty are perpetuated. And
Mhm.
I remember saying to my therapist that it wasn't that I was afraid that I wasn't beautiful. I think there are times where I would be like, oh, like, you look good today. I
Yeah.
think that my innate fear was that like others would not find me attractive,
Yeah.
right? So it was really more of like, I think like sexiness, right? And in a
Mhm.
way, it was just like, I don't know if I'm going to appeal to others. Like I know that I find me beautiful. I know in like that my friends and family find me beautiful. Like it's not going to be enough to make them not love me, but will other people like
Mhm.
even in this field, I felt unqualified because I'm like, how can you be a fat therapist
Mhm.
helping eating disordered patients? And so as even just through doing the work with eating disorder patients of having to struggle through that cognitive dissonance of
Hmm.
oh, like this doesn't unqualify me. My body size
Right.
doesn't unqualify me. But I think that ultimately getting back to your point of identifying the values, and as a therapist, if somebody were to come to me and say, and I've done this with many people, where it's like, okay, why do you want to lose weight? What is like, okay, you want to exercise. Why? Like, let's get to the value. And I think
Mhm.
the struggle is in doing it with friends, right? Is I don't want to preach or counsel or therapize my friends. And I think innately there's just going to be areas where it's like really hard to find that
Mhm.
balance. But I think of wanting to be approachable to people,
Mhm.
wanting people to know, hey, if you want to process. And so I really try to set boundaries around it too, of like,
Yeah.
if you want me to stop, what I will love you and support you no matter what you do. But if you want to go, if you want to work through this, if you want to talk through it, I'm game, because I love this topic, and I
Yeah.
and I want you to experience these things, but I also don't want to cross any friendship
Right.
boundaries.
Right. Well, and what I've had to do for myself in those moments is it's guesswork. And so I'm going to admit that these are assumptions and that it might not be true. But in that moment, I get to ask myself, what are they valuing? How are they feeling? And what are they maybe valuing? And then I try to speak to that.
That's good.
And so for a lot of people too, with value work, um, it's almost like that the why behind the why. For some people, respect, success, health, like those are values. But I sometimes I say, okay, let's dig deeper. Like if you were beautiful, what would you then experience? If you
Mm,
were successful, what would you value? Like so it's kind of like, okay, that's kind of a surface aspirational, like this is what I need to have in order to have this or experience this. And it's like,
right.
okay, well now you're attached to an outcome. So let's step back a little bit more and let's pretend you already had that. What would your life be like now? And
Mm-hmm.
so if someone is sharing with me and talking about this diet or whatever, I have to stop and tell myself, like, they're not asking me to coach them, right? They're just coming to me as a family or
Right.
family member or friend. But I get to kind of put on my detective hat and say, okay, knowing what I know about them and what is important to them and what they value, what is this representing and how can I speak to that, like underneath, right? And maybe
Mm-hmm.
it's like, maybe I know my friend is going through some difficulties in her marriage, or our family member is really stressed at work or something, and they're feeling stagnant in whatever is happening in their life, right? If that were the case, for example, then I can say, okay, what could they possibly be trying to experience in this diet? Maybe I know that they're struggling at work, and maybe they are really wanting to experience accomplishment. They just want to know that they can carry through or follow through, I mean, with something to experience a sense of accomplishment,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I can be like, oh, well, that sounds interesting. And then kind of like segue into, well, how is this going? What if you tried this? And that isn't necessarily related to the diet itself, but it's speaking to that value that they're actually wanting to
Right. That's kind of
experience.
good.
Does that make
I
sense?
like it. 100%. It's like getting to the root of the problem. And so what I find too, and what I remember from diet culture, is it's like somebody comes to you and like, I'm doing X diet, and it's like, oh, you should be doing this diet.
Mhm.
And you're like, wow, this is exhausting. And I know I would get defensive. I'd be like, why is this
Oh
diet better
yeah.
than? And
Yeah,
so
because
that,
it's a belief system. Food beliefs are the new religion. So if you question someone's diet, they will get feisty because you're speaking to that basic need of acceptance,
yeah,
and they'll flip.
yeah, so good. This made me think of another question that I'll ask later. But no, I think it's a really good point of just getting to the underneath, because it's like, as a friend of like, right, because I mean, especially as a coach or as a therapist, I'm really good at at sort of identifying root causes. And as a therapist, I'd want you to come to it on your own. But as a
Right.
friend, I knew, all right, well, it sounds like this is what you need in your life. Like, like, why don't we just, how can I help you be there
Yes.
in that? So if it is wanting to feel accomplished, or if it is, trying to appeal to other people, or whatever that case may be, because ultimately I do believe that dieting is a symptom, right? So
Right.
at its core, I do believe that, and that is my belief, and I can't unbelieve it.
Right.
But
Right.
I also do believe that it is your body and it is your choice.
Right.
And that if at the end of the day you want to do a diet, and I don't think that you're, at risk of dying, right? From said diet, like you're not actively in an eating disorder, that, you're underweight, or whatever the case may be, then I mean, I'm not gonna, I can't put my beliefs on
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
And again, that goes back to it really is tricky because it's like I know that diet culture perpetuates really unhealthy beliefs and behaviors. And so I can't support I can't support that. But I can support you and what you're wanting to experience value wise. And so I'm going to support that, but I can't support this necessarily.
that makes sense. And I don't even need to tell you that I
No.
don't support your diet, because it would be
No.
like, even if it, like, so in the faith-based conversation, right? Even if you ultimately disagree what I believe in, I don't need to tell you I disagree with you. Like, that we have differences in beliefs.
Right.
My hope is that not to distance people, right? That if or when it fails, that they feel shame that they can't come to me. Like, I want to be there through the whole process, because I've often found too, it's like, I wonder, I don't know if I was actively dieting when I came across Health at Every Size and intuitive eating. I don't know if I would have prescribed to it. I don't know. I know that when it found me, it was the right time. It was the perfect time. And it was like, everything I've ever known makes sense now. Um, but also wanting to be supportive.
Mhm.
Like, it's this very slippery slope of, I want to hold my beliefs, and I don't want to, I see, it sounds so religious, right? I don't want to condone what you're doing,
Mhm.
but at the same time, I don't want you to not talk to me about it. Like, I
Right.
want to be open to talking about it.
Yeah.
And maybe, that maybe you can teach me something that I don't know, right? Like, that I'm open to what you have to say.
Yeah.
So, very messy.
It is messy. And it's hard for me too because I notice that sorry, I've got like
No, you're fine.
um, when someone does kind of do a dump, like a diet dump on me, I still have a tendency to be like, oh, maybe that would work. But I've learned enough to be like, okay, hold on. What's going on, Beth? Like, why is that alluring? Why is that promise of success? Like, why is that still intriguing to you?
Right.
But that's because I'm in a place that I do have a certain level of self-awareness. But because
Right.
a lot of people don't, that's why people are jumping from one bandwagon to the next. And so if
Right.
you can be one of the few voices that says, hey, you don't have to be on a bandwagon, you're enough as you are right now.
Right.
I would rather align with that than all the other like that voice. Diet culture is such a loud, big presence that it doesn't need any more supporters,
I agree. I agree.
It
And
just
that's why I'm also like, I want to not be a judgmental voice, because I
yeah.
love this community. And if you're in it, we love you.
Mhm.
But there have been like a couple times where I'm like, I'm going to talk to this person, or I post a post, and then people will comment and be like, don't they have these, questionable views? And I'm like, like, I get it, but like, is shaming them a way of helping them to see or
I
understand?
don't, yeah, seeing that, and that's where I differ from, I guess, other influencers, if you want to call me that. But
Yeah, I would call it that.
that is not a strategy I align with.
Same.
And I don't know if these people are, I mean, I don't really think people purposefully try to shame people, but for me, when I am reading stuff that feels shameful or I'm interpreting as shameful, I know that there's either a value that's missing for me or there's some kind of unresolved emotion that's going on
For
for
sure.
me and the other person. So if for me, if it's like, man, they sure are angry, like that's coming across, like I can feel it, right? And I'm sure other people are. And some people really resonate with that because they're still angry, right?
Yeah.
But as I've learned through therapy, like therapy and stuff, like anger is just a secondary emotion, right? So what's going on for you? Like, why are you so angry? Why do you feel so strongly that you have to tell people that they're wrong? What's going on for you? And so for me as a consumer, I can kind of just offer some empathy and say something must be going on, and I can again dig deep and say what might they be valuing, like what is missing for them. And maybe it's something like influence or equality or like something like that, right?
Right.
And that's again, it always goes back to values for me. That is like, well,
Yeah.
that I can resonate with and that I can support. This
Yeah.
behavior, this language doesn't do it for me, but this value I get,
Yeah.
you know.
Yeah. I think so. As a therapist, I would actually, I do agree that oftentimes anger is a secondary emotion. I do think anger is a core emotion. And I
Yeah,
think
that's true.
especially, right? So for people who, like I think of Inside Out, like I like the emotions that they represent, like they all represent something important and they all have a purposeful function. And so I believe at the core, those who are shaming other people for, diet cultural thoughts, right? That they're angry and probably justified from
Yes.
the hurt that they have experienced. But I think I have been somebody who has been so hurt by fat phobic and weight stigmatizing statements and belief systems my entire life. And I'm like,
Mhm.
now again, because I'm a therapist, I think I'm able to sort through it a lot easier. But I think also what happens for me is it's like, right, I'm posting this thing. And then when somebody is jumping on it, I'm like, oh, well, they have these beliefs. That's when the imposter syndrome comes up. I'm like, oh my gosh, did I do something wrong? Like,
Yes.
did I post
Yes.
something that is offensive to people? And then I gotta say, wait a second. Like, I'm not gonna make everybody happy.
No,
And
not possible.
trying to is just pointless. And that I'm not going to post something or someone that I believe is going to cause harm to the people who are following me or to anybody in this community. And that I
Mhm.
trust myself to have enough judgment of who I'm selecting to highlight on my page. And honestly,
Mhm.
even who I follow. There are people who I follow who I'm like, I don't know if I would post your stuff
Yeah.
because I feel it is very um what's the word, distancing or um
I get the sense of what you're saying. I'm
isolating,
blanking out on
discriminate.
words too.
Yeah, I'm blanking on the word, but yeah, I do feel like in one on one hand, people have a right to feel. You have a
Yes,
right to be
absolutely.
angry, but how you choose to respond with that anger is important. So I think that's where the value piece comes in of, I would never, if you posted something and I've interacted with you, I would never comment on your post and be like, don't you think that I would email you or I would,
I would say you
message
probably reach out to me private and be like,
you.
"Hey,
I
I'm
just want to know your
confused. What
thoughts
does
on
this
it.
mean?" Or
Right.
I
Right.
think the other thing too is, and you had mentioned this earlier about what was it about? Um, Basically this idea that we can't control other people's perception of ourselves. Like,
Yeah.
so you could say, well, I feel beautiful today, and this isn't a but or and also know that someone else might not find you beautiful.
Yeah.
But then you have a choice. You're like, okay, where am I going to put my energy? Where am I going to put my time and effort into supporting that? Whose belief do I want to support? I'm going
Right.
to choose to align with my truth and what feels good to me
Mhm.
rather than waste all my energy like worrying about them.
Everybody else. Yep.
And so if I share something either publicly or privately with someone else, not that I do this all the time or perfectly, but I really do have to tune in and check in with myself of, is this for me?
Mm.
Like, is
Mm.
this my truth, or am I just saying something to satisfy someone else's truth or to convince someone else of my truth? Because really, I can't anyways. Like, all it is me. We're all here having our own individual experiences, and we're interconnected and interrelated. So it's not like we can live in bubbles.
Right?
But when we step outside of ourselves, trying to pacify everyone else,
Mm-hmm.
really it's just a symptom of something's going on with me. I'm uncomfortable. Why?
That's so good.
Right?
That's so good. And I think too of like, I think it's a really good point of we can't expect other people to be where we are, right? And even though I consider myself to be a really, you know, thoughtful and patient individual, I can't expect everybody to be that way.
Mm-hmm.
And that how I would choose to respond to something is maybe not how someone else would. But just because I do something different doesn't necessarily mean it's wrong.
Yeah.
And that even comes back to right with dieting. I mean, I do believe from my experience, right, that dieting it is a symptom, that it can trigger things, and that is my belief. And somebody else may hold the belief that that's not true for them, and that a diet is not. And it is not right for me to tell you what you're doing is wrong. If it's wrong for me, and if somebody's coming to me and they're like, I want your help, it's like, okay, well, this is my thought process that I align with. And if we don't align, then that's fine.
Mm-hmm.
But also that, like this is, I can't change how, like how I help people in that sense. Not that I'm not willing to grow.
Mm-hmm.
But of just not making things like all or nothing. Like, oh, well, now I'm never going to post you because you caused dissent on my page or
Right.
whatever.
Right.
Not that my page is that active, but I'm
Okay,
just
awesome.
trying to be mindful of the time. But I have two really important questions that I
Okay.
definitely want to get to. So, right, even as a professional, even as somebody who has experienced this, I guess it's just been more recent. So again, as a coach, I would love your opinion on this. When you have somebody, right? So I had one person come to me and be like, "Oh no, I want to tell you about that," but then I had somebody else who came at me with, "I want you to do this diet with me," and I'm like,
Oh, like a support buddy?
like so it's somebody older in my life
Okay.
who probably isn't on social media, so probably doesn't know like all of the things that and I have tried to, with dissent, say, I don't believe in that anymore. I don't prescribe to a diet. Like, your body, your choice. You do what you got to do.
Mm-hmm.
But here's my why, and get shut down really fast with evidence I'm like, can you show me a source for that?
Yeah.
And so it's funny because it's like I've had clients that have come to me and be like, "Oh, I have this uncle or aunt or grandparent," and I'm like, "Well, here's what you can do." And then I'm in it, and I'm like, "Well, shoot, I don't know. I don't know how to help you now."
Yeah.
So when you have somebody who does believe that they have the answer and aren't necessarily willing to listen to your beliefs, right?
But they want your support? Like,
They want you, like, so I mean,
so
she was
is it you? Okay, so are they asking you to do it with them, or is it more like this should
she
be done
wants
and
me
you
to,
should do it?
that's one.
Mm. So maybe this is like overly simple. I can just share what I have done for me personally,
Please, yeah.
because I have tons of family and friends who are, wellness coaches or
Hmm.
health advocates, or, and again, diet culture is
Hmm.
prominent. And part of me is like, do you not read what I I don't know,
She
there's like a
this
disconnect there.
this
So
individual probably doesn't, because,
maybe
and
not, or it
maybe,
probably just doesn't make sense or hasn't sinked in. Like, who knows, right? I'm not judging.
Yeah.
So there's a couple of different things that you can do. You can say no, and here's why, right? And I have done that. If that
It just
doesn't work, or if that's
yeah.
hard for you or
Yeah.
uncomfortable, then I just say, hey, I'm glad that's working for you. I'm not interested. Thank you.
Man, isn't
That's
that
all.
crazy? It's so simple.
Can you do
And
that? Like, or have you done that and it hasn't worked?
so I think what I tried to do was she was like, I want you to read this book. And I was like, I have a lot of books that I actually want to read right now. And she was like, no, but this is going to change your life. And going into why this particular diet is the only way to live. And I was like, what work I do, that I work with eating disorder patients, and I just really don't prescribe to diets anymore. And, well, this isn't a diet, it's a lifestyle. I'm like, oh my God. Go on my Instagram page. Just read my post. And I love this person so much, but it actually makes it hard to be around them because it's all they want to talk about.
Yep.
And I was like, I was tired the night they were talking to me. I was like, let's set up another time to talk. But it's like, it's not going to be purposeful. Like, she's planning to go into it, to talk to me into it. And I really just want to set some boundaries that like, I'm not interested. Thank you for telling me. If you want to talk to me about your experience, that's fine. And this is somebody who is there, they're in my family. And the first time after hearing about intuitive eating and health every size and diet culture talk, and I walked in their house, I was like, oh no, like it's everywhere. Like, oh, this cake is so healthy. It's made with good this and that. And I was like, oh no, what do I do?
Yeah.
I've never been so like attuned to it. Whereas now I can process it out, and I challenge with discretion of like, oh, I'm so bad because I'm going to have another piece. And I'm like, or you could just listen to your body and see what your body wants. And, like, oh, you're not a bad person because you decide that your palate wants more, like little things here and there, because of knowing how not open they are, right? Like, it's evident that they're not open to what I have to say because they didn't have the answer, which is fine. But feeling like my boundary, like I don't even know where to put one.
Yeah.
Like, where do you even set a boundary that it's like, I have different beliefs and you're welcome to yours and I'm welcome to mine, and that's okay. And we don't have to agree about everything.
Yeah. Oh, boundaries are so fun. So there are like two different kinds of boundaries, right? There's boundaries that you have for you. So like, for example, I'm not purposefully going to go into those kind of conversations. Like, I'm not going to visit this site or this page because I know that that's what they're talking about. And I don't, right? So that's like my personal boundary, right? For example. But then there are like boundaries that you have for other people, but it's not about controlling them, right? It's just about what you need and what you say for what you're aligned with, right?
Right.
And so it gets really hard with loved ones. It really does. It's tricky. I think it's something that you need to practice, like in front of the mirror. and really maybe just with the intention of I'm not going to talk about food with this person. Just not going to at all. That as in, like, if they say something, you can be like, oh, that's interesting, and then change the conversation. You don't have to have this Bible bash session, right? You don't have to have this like, well, here's what I believe. Well, here's what I believe. Like, unless you think that's actually going to be received, for me, I'm like, what is the point? That's
good.
So it's kind of like either you go into the conversation, knowing what you're going to say, and also it goes back to being unattached from the outcome, right? Like, what is your intention overall? Is it that she'll change her mind so that she can accept your beliefs? Because essentially, if you flip this story, she could be having the same conversation with me of like, well, my friend will not listen to me because she doesn't believe the way I do about food. And it's like, yeah. So it's kind of like, well, what are you wanting out of this conversation or even this relationship with this person? Are you hoping to change her mind? because you probably
No,
can't. And if you don't,
no.
then you got to ask yourself, okay,
What
then
can you do?
what can I do, or what do I want to do? So if she
Yeah.
says, hey, do this diet with me, you'd be like, no thanks, and just be a broken record. Oh, come on,
Yeah.
it'd be so awesome. I'm not interested. Hey, what did you think about that game last night, or whatever, you
Yeah.
know? Um, but that's the thing that comes to my head, but that's because I'm not a conflict person. I tend to just
Right?
not say anything or leave the conversation, because what's the point, I
I
guess?
always say that I'm really good with boundaries with people who are good with boundaries. So if you
Mm-hmm.
respect boundaries, I have no problem setting boundaries up. But if you become offended by my boundaries, then I veer away from it because of the potential conflict it could cause.
Yeah.
Even as a therapist, and I've actually worked
Yeah.
through this with my current therapist, where it's like, even I had a family that I was working with, and it was a stupid boundary. They were like, stay for dinner, and I said, no thank you, I have dinner plans. They're like, no, you have to stay for dinner, it's so late, just eat a little bit. And I, in my mind, like, I had already started to like clinically justify, like, okay, probably would be good, but I didn't want to, like, I didn't want to, because I had made a crock pot soup that I was looking forward to eating, and it was late, and I just wanted to go home, and I had a training the next morning. And
Mm-hmm.
my therapist was like, you could have said no. And she was like, they didn't have a gun to your head. I'm like, I know, but I didn't want to offend them. And she said, you have to be okay with your boundaries offending other people. And it's still something that's hard for me to grasp. Can teach it to other people,
I
but then when
know.
faced with it, because it's like, I really did try like a couple times to say, like, and to put it up, and she wasn't getting it. And so I needed to set a firmer boundary. And this is where we live in a generation where it's like, I really believe in dealing with conflict face to face. She might not be somebody I can do this face to face. I might need to text her and say, hey, can't wait to see you today. Can we talk? Can you do me a favor? Can we not talk about diets? It's not something I want to talk about today
Yeah.
or ever. And that would never be my go-to, because I would want to be the person that talks to you in person. But if she's not somebody that respects boundaries, that it's going to be hard. It's going to be
Yeah.
hard to even interject where she gets, because like, it's funny because she'll be like, yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, but, and it's
Yeah.
that but, or
Yeah.
she'll say it as an end, and I'm like, well, it's just a fancy but. Like, you're still opposing what I'm saying, you know?
Yeah.
And so, even as a professional, even with all of the experience I have, even with all of the research I have at my fingertips, I still, sometimes I'm like, it's like a, a tumbleweed just go. I'm like, I don't know what to say right now. And I think it really does come back to your motive of like, okay, so then why? What happens for you when somebody confronts you with something
Mm-hmm.
and you don't know how to respond? Because you have to think about in that moment, okay, well, what do I want to accomplish here? And
Mm-hmm.
so, like, for the other person I was talking to, I wanted them to know, I'm a safe person for you no matter what.
Mm-hmm.
With this other person, I wanted them to know, you are welcome to your beliefs. I'm not interested in your beliefs. And truthfully, you talking over me and to me, and it's overwhelming, and I can't handle it. And
Mm-hmm.
that's okay. And we can talk about anything else you want. I don't want to talk about this. And that's okay too.
Yes, that's okay too. Yeah. I the only other thing that I would say, I guess, and this is where I like bring in like yoga and meditation and stuff,
Yeah.
is sitting with the possible outcomes, like kind of doing
Mm,
mental practice
good.
and really coming up with the perfect scenario. Like, what do you hope to experience? And just kind of
Yes.
sit with that. How does that feel? Envision having that conversation with them. There's this tool I call, or I learned from another friend of mine who's a hypnotherapist, and it's called like a heart to heart communication. And you
Mm,
just sit and you have like this conversation in your head with this person. It's not an argument. It's not trying to convince them that you're right and they're wrong or anything. It's just having a safe place to talk that out. And sometimes, because I believe that, stuff can happen on an energetic level,
mhm,
they will feel that from you. So
mhm.
when you go into this conversation, they're not feeling this uber defensiveness, or they're not ready for an attack. They're just like,
Yeah.
they sense that kind of openness. You know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
A little
I think that's so
woo-woo-y,
true.
but it works.
I like the woo woo. And I
It
think that,
works.
right, it's a holistic approach, right? So it's not
Yeah.
just the mental, physical, emotional, it's also
Yes.
spiritual. So,
Yes.
and
So
I
I
do
really,
believe in energy. So I think that if I come into, like, I can feel when somebody's coming in to fight with me. Like, and I rev up, I'm ready for it.
yeah,
But
yeah, exactly. So I think it's really helpful to get clear on your intention and what are the values are and all that good stuff. And then honestly, in the moment, giving yourself permission to leave or
Mhm.
not say anything. It's really
Yeah.
it's more of like if you do say like, okay, sure, sure. And then it's after the conversation you beat yourself up like, oh, I should have said this. I should have done that. Why didn't I do that? Blah, 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 blah. And it's dealing with the after effects of that conversation.
That's good. I
Yeah.
like that. I'm very big about permission slips. And I
Hmm.
think that it's actually almost like rule-y, right? Like rule-based to say like I should handle conflict this way. And as opposed to being like, I give myself permission to not handle conflict perfectly.
Yes.
Right.
I will
So
put
I
in a
think
huge plug for like nonviolent communication. Look that up. It's super helpful.
like that. Yeah, I'm very big about conflict resolution and
Mhm.
again, I think when you are working with somebody who has and respects boundaries, it's a much different ballgame. I have to leave soon, so I definitely want to ask my
Okay.
last
Last
question.
question.
Which I don't know. I don't know if it'll be as loaded as these other ones were, but um, in what I have come across, I don't know. I don't know if you know this. I don't know if we talked about this at all. I had a bariatric surgery in 2010. I had
Oh,
a
I
lap
didn't
band,
know.
hmm
Mhm.
and I actually had it removed a couple of years ago. And every time I go to the doctor, I'm asked like, "Oh, like, are you interested in having this surgery?" And I'm like, "No, nothing." And
Mhm.
so I had been talking to a friend recently who had bariatric surgery
Mhm.
and felt unwelcomed in the body image community because she something along the lines of like I've already done the thing.
I've already altered my body.
Right, right. So how do you propose that we make people who've had bariatric surgery feel welcomed in
Mhm.
this community?
Mhm. That is such a good question. First of all, the body changes, whether you've had surgery or not, right? You have a past body, your
Yeah,
current body, and a future body.
yeah.
Your body does change, whether or not you do it on purpose or not on purpose. So,
Mhm.
and I actually know Gemma, who's super amazing, and I can get you in touch with her. She has had weight loss surgery and then discovered intuitive eating and health at every size. So she's like literally struggled with like now what, right?
Wow.
And Kristen Ackerman has an awesome resource for those who have gone through weight loss surgery and how
Cool.
to integrate intuitive eating and HAES into their lives now. But
Yeah.
really, so my biggest thing though is you have a body now. Give yourself grace for whatever you've done in the past and what you're going to do to it now, but what does your body need and want now?
Mm.
Right? That was in the past. Okay. You're going to have regrets. Oh, I wish I had done this or hadn't done that. But living now in the present, that's all you have control over anyways, is today, this very second. So right now, I would say you need to find a community that is supportive. And if you don't feel welcome, that could be dependent on the community, but that's probably indicative of something going inside of you,
Mm.
right?
Mm.
Right?
That's good.
Which is probably related in some way to what caused you to have that surgery in the first place because you weren't enough. So that's showing up again in a different way,
Hmm. And,
right?
and and it's even that, right? It's like I don't blame anybody that gets bariatric surgery because it is shoved down your throat as the only option. It is the only thing going to save you. And even with as much knowledge as I have, and I know, I still get bombarded every time I go to the
What?
doctors. And I have to say, no, thank you, I'm good. And I don't know if I had found health at every size and intuitive eating, if I wouldn't have considered, and it's just like, so even though I had it removed, and they were like, okay, well, would you like another surgery? And I was like, not at this time. I was like,
Mhm,
this is 6 years later
mhm,
and I'm having it removed. So I want to see, like
mhm,
how, 10 years from now, how are the people that I
mhm.
know who've had surgery, like what's the benefit they've experienced? But
Yeah.
I think it comes back to that, like not judging people. And
Mhm.
it's, I had done a story a long time ago of like, how do we love people where they are rather than where we want them to
Mhm.
be? And I
Right.
think any responses that I was like, I really feel like this is helpful, right? It's like, I felt like a lot of people were saying like, well, like you can like people and disagree with them. I was like, yeah, that's not what I was going for. It's like, how do you love people?
Yeah.
How do I tell somebody who believes something completely different than me, I love you and you are entitled to your beliefs.
Yep.
And even though I disagree, I still love you and I want to support you
Mm.
and be your friend. And so
Yeah.
I definitely feel like we do need to have more resources for people who
Yes, we
have
do.
altered their bodies,
We do.
because I
Absolutely.
think it is just a lie, right? That you're not welcome, and
Mhm.
that we all experience that, like
Well, and how I can just imagine, because this is not my experience, I don't know what that's like, but I can only imagine feeling unwelcome and unaccepted in this body. And now you have this new body and you're feeling once again unwelcome and unaccepted.
correct, correct.
Now, certainly communities do play into that, but you can't control society. You can only control yourself. So that's where you get to go in and say, my body, my choice. What's
Mhm.
going on for me? What do I value? What do I want to experience? And how can I find others to support that, that
Mm,
speak to that,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
Because, and I know a lot of people who are huge body positive influencers, they live in larger bodies, have a really big following and have learned tons and have disbanded, all the lies about diet culture. And then they decide that they want to start working out or they want to change their eating habits and they are terrified. And then they're like actively trolled for being a hypocrite. And it's like, whoa, 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 people, it's her life. It's her body, her
No.
choice. How
Right,
can we support her instead of tearing her down? Like, why
right.
why do we feel the need to do that in the first place? So if
Agreed.
everyone was just more self-reflective and
Mhm.
understanding and empathetic and vulnerable, like we would
Would be a
change
better
the
person. Yeah, I definitely agree with that, and I think it's remembering, like I had a friend say to me once, like, the more you feel like you shouldned be somewhere or the more you feel like you don't belong, like that's when you need to lean in. That's when you need to press in.
world.
And
Right.
so I think it's a great isolator to think, well, I'm not welcome here.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think that inclusivity is important, and I do think
Yes, I do.
that
Yeah.
our language is important. And so I really I try to be really mindful of that on my page. And I know that you do as well.
Mhm.
But even as I listen to podcasts or right, like I'm like, wow, like even like I was listening to a podcast the other day, and they were coming up with solutions for something, and it was very like, like you can go out and buy new clothes, and I was like, not everybody has that
Everyone can.
privilege, right? And to recognize that, like, so yeah, that's a possibility, but like that might not be an option for everybody. So what else can we
Yes.
do, right? What's
Well,
another option for you? And so I think as providers or as influencers, that we also need to be conscious of everybody on the scope and sharing our message with pride, right, with dignity, not backing away from it, not trying to, because I was even talking to somebody that had made a post, and I was like, do you not think people who are on the diet can be body positive? And she said, I don't. And I struggle with that because I get it, and so somebody who's recovered from an eating disorder, and so like I get it. I understand why you think that,
mhm.
but I think to say, well, you're not welcome because you're on a diet, it keeps them isolated, and there's tons of people who are going to
Yeah.
welcome them and say, yeah, you're right
You
where you should
know,
be.
it is really hard though. I will say, and I know you've got to go. It is a
Yeah.
slippery slope though, because you only know what you know and you don't know what you don't know, right?
My mom loves that quote.
So you cannot please everyone. You cannot even be consciously aware of what everyone's personal experience is.
Right.
So being open and willing, or just knowing that you might offend someone.
Right.
You
Right.
just you will, because you can't foresee what their experience is. And so I think in an effort to be all inclusive, you can kind of lose sight of yourself and the people that you can help. I mean, that goes into business talking with like niching down and everything, right? And so for me, it's kind of like, okay, this is what I do know, this is what I am passionate about, this is who I can help. And I know I'm not going to be speaking to everyone. I might even be offending people out there, either in these areas that I am aware of or areas I do not know of. But
Yeah.
I'm going to let go. I'm going to disattach from the outcome and my need to please everyone, and just trust that they are going to find someone that does resonate with them, because I
Yeah.
can't be, we're not supposed to be the end all be all for everyone.
That's
And
good.
so it's kind of like, if someone does start to attack you, or if you are feeling overwhelmed trying to play all those roles, you can kind of say, thank you for being here. I really do want to help and support you. And I realize that I might not be the best voice. Have you tried these other people?
Hmm. That's good. That's good. I like that. And I think that speaks to the importance of having a community, right? And not just like even in my group of friends who are therapists, it's like we all have different strength sets. And so, I met up with a friend earlier today who has a lot of experience with kids. And so we were bouncing some ideas off of each other because she has that experience that I don't necessarily have. And
Yeah.
so even remembering that in this sect, in this community, that people are going to have different specialties and different skill
Mhm.
sets, and that being okay and being able to. So even the other day, I did an interview with Jake from at the Fit
Yes,
Coach,
the coach. Yes,
and
he's great.
and he thank you, and he's awesome, and he has just so much knowledge. And I was like, I could never speak to any of this because that's not my experience, not my specialty, but you do, which is awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the important thing. That's what I do as, I don't even know what to call, like, as a professional or whatever, um is to make sure that I am open to learn,
Mhm.
that I am willing to lean into that discomfort and say what is going on for me here, but really to create connections outside of myself, outside of my own
Mhm.
little community, my own little niche, right? And to
Yeah,
reach out to like you or Jake or Kirsten or like other people, so that I can expand my awareness. I can, support them. And then the people that I'm not supporting, I can redirect them to someone else who might support them. Right.
right. Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, this was so good. I feel so good right now. So I'm so
Awesome.
grateful you took the time to do this with me. I
Yeah,
really
you're
appreciate it.
so welcome. Thank you.
I'm so
Thanks
glad we
for
recorded
chatting
it.
with me. I know. Me too.
All right. So
Okay.
do you want to
I will see
end?
you later. We should just have like a monthly conversation. I'm
I
thinking.
think that would be great. I think that would be awesome. And next time I'll let you ask questions too.
Yeah, we'll take
I
turns.
took the whole time. That sounds good.
So that's good. All right. We'll
All
see you
right.
later. Have a
Sounds
nice
good.
day. Okay.
Thanks so much. You too. Have a great
You're
weekend.
welcome. All right. Bye.
Bye.